Hi, I am TD King.
Mitch Baltazar.
MACNAK Construction. We wanted to talk about the some of the, I guess you'd say, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, natural disasters, and how ICF performs.
Right. The benefits of having ICF during a natural disaster, protecting you versus like a wood frame or stick frame home.
Yeah, or even steel frame, but we have some comparison between steel on like the lateral resistance, hurricane resistance, wind resistance, wind loading, steel and 2x6 versus ICF. So let's launch into it.
All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the benefits of ICF for earthquakes.
Yeah.
So in this slide here, I kind of pulled up. We're kind of just looking at some rebar reinforcement here in ICF, which is pretty standard across all builds. Just kind of want to showcase that it's not just concrete within foam. You have your rebar reinforcement as well.
Yeah, and what's interesting to note about that is that, and most people don't realize this, that so the concrete has some flexibility, and we'll see that when you see concrete crack, that's when the rebar actually kicks in. So the rebar really doesn't do anything in the wall until the concrete starts to crack, and then it kicks in. So if you look at some of the studies where they are testing them with and without rebar, you can see when the break happens and the concrete snaps, then you'll see a spike in the strength of the concrete that has rebar in it, and the rebar is kicking in to keep that wall from falling apart versus a concrete wall without rebar in it. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Cool. Just kind of moving on to the next slide here. This is just an example of maximum lateral resistance, kind of what you mentioned earlier. So we build with flat concrete at MACNAK.
Yeah.
So our walls essentially have the maximum amount of lateral resistance you can choose, but one of the benefits of going with ICF, especially in a earthquake zone, I guess you could say, in Pacific Rim, you can choose the seismic resistance of the house you want. So you can see on this graph here, you have the waffle grid, screen grid, and then flat concrete. Different products work differently for different builds and designs, but the biggest thing to point out here is the comparison to the steel frame and the wood frame standard homes. Yeah,
and this max lateral resistance would cross over to tornadoes, high wind, snow loads, earthquake resistance. All that stuff would be things you'd experience with an ICF concrete wall that are going to surpass the wood frame and steel frame walls.
Yeah. So moving on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about flooding. Obviously, floods don't typically wipe out a house, but if it's a lahar or strong waters, I know a lot of hurricanes bring in strong waters, the house will stay standing after something like this.
Yeah, and then the obvious, or maybe not so obvious, inside those walls, if you have organic material, wood, it molds, it breaks down. So something as simple as a nail going in for a picture frame or to hang, a shelf from your wall, that wood gets weakened every time you put a new screw nail into the wall.
Right.
Whereas the ICF uses heavyweight plastics, and if you've ever used Trex, any of the new heavyweight plastic composite materials, you know that those plastics will close in on themselves, and you can put another screw right next to it. It's not falling apart like wood does.
Right.
So it's pretty good, and they're obviously mold
mold
free.
and pest and bug resistant. So after a flood clears out, you can pretty much go on your day as normal. Besides any other damage that you might have, your house will still be standing.
You might need some new drywall.
Quite possible.
If it's underwater.
Especially in this house right here.
Some new carpet.
Some new carpet. So moving on to fires. This is just kind of a picture of a fire. This is the San Diego fire. These houses right here were lucky enough not to be hit by the fire, but you can see the truck here engulfed in flames. But this was down in San Diego not too long ago. But here, this is one of the photos that kind of show the impact of ICF and fire resistance.
Yeah, that's surprising.
It's pretty incredible. This is a neighborhood down in San Diego where you can see everything is pretty much leveled, including most of the palm trees. But the ICF homes don't have any photos of it, but the siding, I read in the article that this came from.
Yeah.
The siding was melted.
And it was stucco too.
It was
stucco. That was
stucco.
surprising.
Yep. So, but the house itself, or the homes themselves, blocked the fire from encompassing the house, which is really nice.
Yeah. So the pictures that we're describing, we read about the stucco. You can see where the stucco and the foam melted, but the house is standing, and they were able to just resheet that with new foam and new stucco.
Yeah.
And the inside of the house was fine.
Yeah, because inside that burnt foam was just 6 inches or so of concrete core.
Yeah.
And that just completely saved that house from being burned alive and collapsing on itself.
Yeah.
So
be interesting to see if a person could live inside there.
Well, I mean, later on in this video, we'll be talking about the Kleb test. So you
yeah,
can
that's
see
true.
the
That's
thermal bridging and whatnot. I mean, I don't know about oxygen supply.
Yeah, and the windows.
Yeah, and the windows. So moving on here. This is just, you need oxygen for fires to spread and to burn. So we're just kind of showcasing. We use, what is it, Fox?
Yeah, Fox buck.
Fox buck.
And that's basically a insulation that goes on to cover the concrete where the windows are going in.
Right.
So you don't have any thermal bridging from your concrete wall through the window.
Yeah, no air
outside.
gaps in between your headers or anything like that to worry about. So if a fire were to burn through the side of a house and get into a cavity in the wall and then make its way on the inside of the house, this is where that would help protect. So you have essentially solid concrete all the way around the window at that point. This right here is another, oh no, this is moving on to the next.
This is Katrina.
Yeah, so the pictures of this house here, these have become pretty popular actually on the East Coast. And
that's crazy.
Florida.
Look at that.
It's incredible. So here's the same house.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You can see how every house around it was just completely wiped out by the hurricane. But you can see this house is held up on pylons, and it's still standing. Even the roof's there.
Yeah.
Even after all that, all you see is slab foundation for everything else. So moving on, to continue the topic of hurricanes, we'll talk about Hurricane Michael here. This was pretty recent as well, but this is a house on Mexico Beach in Florida, right there on the water. There are a few houses there, it shows. But this guy in this article, he decided to build, this build was finished shortly before this hurricane happened. And he built this on this piece of property specifically because of hurricanes. And he just wasn't expecting the hurricane to have it pay off so fast. But going on to...
And this is the one that had the breakaway walls, right?
Yeah.
On the basement floor?
Yeah, this house had breakaway walls on the bottom floor, so the flood and the surge that would come in initially would wipe that out, and then the water would flow below it. But all of his living space was above the water level. Yeah, I
remember reading about this one when it came out. It's interesting because they designed the first floor. Obviously, with hurricanes, you have two things. You've got the high wind and debris. And concrete walls are going to be a good, safe bet for both of those. But what's interesting is he had them build this building on pylons on top of spherical pylons. I think they did a bunch of below grade helical piles.
Right.
And that entire first floor for wave action was designed to break away so that the wave could pass. If there was a hurricane, the surge, that initial wave surge could pass underneath the home without destroying it. So pretty smart, but obviously the guy that's hiding right behind his building is benefiting.
All that wind, yeah.
It reminds me of Chris Farley holding onto the roots on the side of that mountain. Hang on, little roots.
Little tree.
That guy's just hanging out behind the ICF house.
Hey, it worked. The ICF protected its own self and the house behind it. But man, look at that devastation.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You can see it looks like some other people had kind of the same idea as far as using pylons and whatnot, but the other house is not so fortunate. You can see
that is crazy to see that destruction.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
Pretty amazing. Of course, this is all just the strength of ICF at that point. So here, we'll move on to the next topic here.
Sure.
So here we've talked about this before on the YouTube channel. Talking about the ICF FMA CLEB test.
Yep.
And this right here is the exterior wall. So this is essentially an isolated room built within a room. The interior room, we'll go to the interior wall here. This is the interior, quote unquote, interior wall of this structure. But the interior room was held at a steady 70 degrees, correct?
Yeah.
And the outside, quote unquote, outside temperature of this wall was at negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. It's Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Yeah, and they basically turn off the energy and then took the calculations you have here, the temperature calculations here, readouts, and compared the 2x6 wall against the concrete wall to determine at what point the temperature between the two walls evened out. Mm-hmm. So you had a full transfer of heat from the hot side to the cold side, and they both equalized. And what shows in the 2x6 wall is it was basically 50 hours, I think they said.
Yep.
55, 60
so
hours.
About 60 hours it took for it to hit that equilibrium.
So 2 days with a standard 2x6 wall, all the heat in the building gone.
Correct.
It was 324 days for the ICF wall to lose all of its heat. Mm-hmm. And the reason is the thermal
hours, not
324 hours. Yeah, 324 hours, sorry. 324 hours that it took for the heat to be lost by the ICF wall. And that is all based on that thermal mass. Mm-hmm. And then the insulation. The insulation, though, the calculation is an R23. So if you look at the insulation for most ICF walls, about 2.5 inches of EPS. Mm-hmm. And that gives you normally a calculated R factor of R23. However, the performance, when like this one, what you're looking at is there's no thermal loss for the first 50 hours.
Yeah, look at that. You can actually see the blue line for ICF start at the 50-hour mark.
So the R factor for that, I don't even know what it'd be. I think we covered it once. I think it's like an R85 or something.
Yeah, so they're looking at about R60 to R85 depending on the wall and the block that you're using.
So that's interesting. So basically, if you look at this graph, it's slowly going down. Over the blue line is obviously the ICF wall. Over 324 hours, you're losing that heat as compared to basically 2 days. And if you really look at it, you're losing. It has a huge temperature drop on the standard 2x6 wall almost immediately within the first few hours or first 12 hours. You have a huge temperature loss inside of the 2x6 wall, which is the red line.
Right.
Whereas you have no temperature loss in the ICF wall. It maintains its heat inside for over 2 days. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty interesting. And we have, I think, did we do on the next graph how that transfers over to energy usage?
So this is energy usage. Obviously, the lower the better. The orange line on the graph represents the usage of power in watts on the 2x6 wall. And then the green, obviously, the ICF wall, and then the red straight line at the top. You can read that here on the screen. The dashed line is essentially what the test would have continued at, is the maximum amount of wattage. But you can see here that on the 2x6 wall, within the first 50 hours, the amount of power it would take to maintain that 70-degree temperature in that little room ramped up fairly quickly. And you can see it essentially maxed out at that 50-hour mark.
Yeah.
Lost all integrity at that
point. And that's what they're showing you with this graph is basically if you were in a standard 2x6 wall, how much power would you put into heating in order to maintain that temperature? Mm-hmm. And so what you're seeing is that you're losing in the 2x6 wall heat constantly,
right?
And so your heating unit is constantly working, mm-hmm. whereas in the ICF wall, you're really not using much. And we've experienced this in our ICF buildings as well, that our heating system will oftentimes not come on for
Yeah.
days.
We've done a video or two on this as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So that house we did out at Gig Harbor, it's big. I think it's 4,800 square feet, and the temperature we did when the 10 days where there was no one in there, it didn't come on.
No, we were
but
looking at
maybe a half hour a day.
19 and 20 degree Fahrenheit weather outside during that time. That was winter time.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
We pulled up. We had the Nest thermostats in there. We were able to look up historical data. I was able to extract that from the owner's login for them, and yeah, it was pretty incredible. It was maybe 20 minutes to a half an hour a day. It would turn on. Yeah, and it would just do that to maintain heat, and it would last all night. Yeah, it's crazy. Incredible.
And that was it was negative, or it was 25 degrees, I think, outside.
Right, and this reinforces that too. Fahrenheit. Yeah, and then that was actually before this test was even presented to us. And you can see this reinforces that concept that for the first almost 50 hours, there was no loss or no heat needed. Yeah. I mean, there's no loss in heat in the room itself.
And that's why I think in an ICF home in the winter weather, even if you're in a mild place like Seattle, the temperatures easily regulated by the units coming on for 15-20 minutes a day.
Right.
If it's really cold, like we saw when it was 25 degrees outside, then it was coming on for a half hour, 40 minutes a day. And then because it was losing no heat, it didn't have to come on for another 24 hours.
Yeah,
it would kick on.
Essentially a trickle.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Just to maintain, which is pretty incredible. On the average, nationwide average, they're saying that in cold temperatures, especially, you're looking at about $150 a month savings for some of these houses.
And that's what this shows. If you read the club test, they say that basically you're looking at 149% improvement in energy efficiency. So it's pretty drastic. 2x6, and this is a standard 2x6 wall with standard insulation. So you're going to get an R23 roughly out of that wall with the thermal bridging at your 2x6 because there's no continuous insulation that covers your 2x6 walls.
Right.
So you're losing all of your heat through the 2x6. But if you compare the 2x6 cost to ICF cost with it wrapped in two coats, basically you'd have to wrap the inside and the outside in 2.5 inches of foam to get the same R factor. The cost is astronomical.
It's astronomical. It's triple the amount of labor, I would say.
Yeah, it was expensive. And the foam isn't cheap.
And the foam, double the amount in actual material costs. So.
And you don't have any interior fur stripping to connect your... So by wrapping it, you basically have to build another building.
Right, and just tying back to the natural disasters, that's just for insulation.
Yeah.
That's for heat efficiency, is where with natural disasters, there's no additional... putting extra foam on the
you still don't have the snow load, you still don't have the tensile load, you don't have the lateral strength of the walls. You're just trying to get the same R factor with an organic wall that will mold and fall apart. It's made of wood,
right?
Which is not
unfortunately
recyclable.
That's what we're seeing a lot in the industry too, is that people don't want to explore ICF because they've been doing this for years with 2x6 framing. So you can definitely see the benefits right away. With ICF.
And here, what we're seeing in Seattle here is that even in residential construction, the ICF, we frame buildings as well, but the ICF, because of the cost of wood in Seattle, the fact that it's not a recyclable product, and especially if you want something LEED, you can't build out of wood. But LEED aside, let's say you're just building a home and you want cost comparison. Because of the cost of wood and the cost of the framing rates that carpenters get in this area are pretty high, the ICF walls are competitive. They're priced competitively. And that's against an R23 compared to a standard ICF wall that greatly surpasses R23. So it's really not apples to apples, but the price is competitive.
Right. And your money is going towards the benefits of the material versus walking off the job site at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a 200-year ICF wall versus a 30-year organic, wood wall.
Right.
But pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah. So we wanted to kind of just cover that, in this video, all the natural disasters, and kind of go over this club test again to kind of give a visual representation of what we've come across and then what others have come across, around the country. And this has probably saved lives, I'm sure, if people have been in their homes, but definitely saved lots of money over the course of time. So, but we appreciate you all watching the videos. We'll be doing another video on the cost comparison for ICF here pretty soon. So be on the lookout for that.
2x6 versus ICF.
2x6 versus
cost comparison. Yeah.
So that way it's a more realistic. We just built a shed out of the Rocky Bay property, and we're going to use that kind of as a comparison as far as what it would cost to build, speed-wise, and then compare that to 2x6 framing.
Yep.
So awesome. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's it.
I think that's it too. If you guys have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them on the Facebook post or in the comments of our YouTube video. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/MACNAK Construction. We are on Instagram as well under @MACNAK Construction. Once again, thanks for watching. Have a good day.